Welcome to Lost in the Supermarket. Today, we're going to explore how does food affect our moods. Joining me is Amy Fox, certified nutritionist and founder of the Food and Mood Lab, to explain just how our food choices affect our performance. Amy's mission is simple: to educate everyone about how our food choices affect our moods, our health, and our vitality. She has a Master of Science in Food and Nutrition Sciences. And Amy, welcome to Lost in the Supermarket.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Phil. I appreciate again the opportunity to anytime I can be talking about food and feeling good. It's always just a fun way to spend my time.
Well, it's important, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic. I don't want to say we're totally out of it yet, even though everybody has said. I think that when people were shut in for so long, they seemed to gravitate towards a lot of junk food because it was there or available on our supermarket shelves. And when I look at studies from the American Psychological Association and other groups, I mean, people are in a bad mood. They're depressed. They don't want to go into supermarkets. They don't want to work into supermarkets, which is why having you join us, is just so important. Let's start out by talking about what the Food and Mood Lab is, and how you're using it to educate people about our food choices.
Yeah, sure. So Food and Mood is my passion project. It's really an opportunity for me to provide awareness and education about the power of food, because we truly are what we eat. And when I believe when you are feeling good and you've got energy and you can focus, it just starts to trickle down in every way that you show up in life. And there's just so much information out on the internet and social media, and it's confusing for most people. I mean, almost every week it feels like there's a new shtick on what you should eat or what you shouldn't eat, or a new diet or a new fad. And while we have so much more information that's easily accessible right at our fingertips, we just keep getting unhealthier and unhealthier. And so and I'm just super passionate about the topic for personal reasons. And so I've been informally learning and really living this, and decided years ago to formalize that and get my master's and really start to help people. And I think the way that I can do that best is by having conversations with people like you, sharing content in simple, easy ways, and just kind of breaking through all that noise with just simplicity, and really focusing more on like how we feel, less than diets or just all in type of plans. So the Food and Mood Lab is really a source, a place, a hub for people to go to collaborate, to share, to learn, and also to get some recipes and ways to kind of activate the thinking and make it a lifestyle that is easy to stick with. Because that's really the key is, do you want to reach for those foods or explore those new areas of the supermarket? Do you want to be doing that? Because if you're not going to want to do it, you just won't do it. So that's my passion right now.
So this morning, I had the occasion to read in the Washington Post a really interesting and disturbing article. And I've been disturbed for probably the past 3 or 4 months about this whole trend of Ozempic, and where people are losing weight, 30, 40, 50 pounds. In fact, the author talked about the fact that she's lost 40 pounds on Ozempic. She has a friend who lost 75 pounds on it. So when I read these things, I'm really concerned that we're not really changing behavior. And again, I am not a scientist. I don't develop medications, and this might have no effect whatsoever, bad effect on people. But I'd be curious to know, how you think about these diet drugs. I mean, yes, they're
Yeah.
designed for diabetes, but they're getting approval as diet drugs. How that changes everything, because yes, we know that obesity leads to cancer and heart disease and diabetes and all kinds of things. So you've got a whole fraction of people who are saying, well, let's take the drug to avoid those health concerns. But I'm concerned about the people themselves, and especially as you talk about food and mood. The
Yeah.
writer of this column was talking about, oh, now she's in a much better mood because people are saying, oh, you really look good, and stuff like that. How does this whole play out in your brain?
You know, to me, I think it's complicated, and I think it's a little controversial right now. And I think because there are people who, well, let me take a step back. The drug has been through clinical trials, and it's been,
Yep.
shown to be effective for weight loss, but for a specific target audience. And I think what we're seeing here is people who want a quicker fix and want to just lose weight and may not necessarily, some people may not qualify for the clinical reasons and benefits, are getting their hands on it. And then it's making it harder for the people who could really benefit from it to get access to these types of drugs. So it concerns me for the same reasons, because it's not it. And actually, I've had flashbacks to my younger years, or watching my mom with some of the old like diet drugs that were on the market, and it reminds me of that because it's a fix. It's not changing behavior and helping you to understand the choices you can be making long term. Because we all probably have read the same things. If you've read that, what happens when you go off the drug?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's complicating matters because people continue to think, might there be a pill, and there is, I've also read there are many other options like these that they're trying to get approved, that are a little bit easier to get your hands on and not injection based. But I don't think it gets at the root issue. And again, for certain people, absolutely, it can have a huge benefit and be a lifesaver. People who are
Hmm.
obese or in dealing with other chronic health conditions that are results of that. So it's exciting for those reasons, for the people that could really use them and perhaps gain back years that they might not have, or have a little bit of an easier path, getting healthier. But for the people who want just a quicker path to just lose weight and look skinnier, have you heard about the Ozempic face? People are saying that there's
Mhm.
a look that you can now tell. So unfortunately, I live in a
Yeah,
community that I don't see a lot of people on
yeah.
Ozempic, but um, yeah, I'm all about it, as you can probably tell by what you've looked at and just what I've shared about the Food and Mood Lab. I mean, it's about sustainable, healthy habits long term, and simplifying the journey along that way. And so I'm aligned with you. I have very similar concerns about it, and it'll be interesting and maybe even scary to see what happens, because we don't know the long term effects of these types of drugs yet. So
And I think
I
that,
think the jury's out.
and I think emotionally it could do more damage. So let's talk about real emotions, real moods, and real food, and how those intersect with each other. So if I have an apple, for example, I
Yeah.
happen to like apples. If I have an apple and I take a bite out of it, I feel good.
Hmm.
And let's go beyond the apple. What are the kinds of foods that we
Sure.
should be consuming to put us in better moods? Because it's probably not caffeine, um, and and it's probably not soft drinks. Okay.
Yeah, occasionally I gotta get the caffeine, especially yeah, but I hear you, and you're right. I mean, think about a situation that you've been in where you've you've enjoyed yourself over a weekend, or you've had and you've just enjoyed yourself and had some of the foods that are either sugary or fried. I mean, sometimes, we do have those foods, and most of the time people feel like they have could potentially feel like they have hangover of sorts or the blues, even when you have had a day or a period of time where you've eaten more unhealthy choices or just kind of binged a little bit. And that's absolutely a real thing. And how literally the food that you choose to eat has a direct impact on how you feel. And it might be helpful to just highlight before we get to the foods, just some of the mechanisms or what's happening there, just to help any listener understand that there truly is some science behind this. And there's not 100% certainty about these mechanisms of actions, but there's enough data and evidence that is allowing us to make some conclusions or have some good insights that nutrition and what's happening in the gut microbiome it is part of the answer and definitely part of the process. So when we decide if we're having ultra processed foods, so foods like that are made like in fast food restaurants or foods that are they have a lot of ingredients. They're boxed or bags, and you start to see ingredients that a long list or a list of things you can't quite pronounce. Those are a great way to identify ultra processed foods. And some of the toxins, because a lot of those foods, especially a lot of those foods are, they're made with manufactured ingredients, not whole foods, whole ingredients, not nutrient dense type of ingredients. And so there are toxins and they leak through your intestines and they get in your bloodstream. And there's leakage that happens and it affects your whole body and actually can pass through the blood brain barrier. And just eventually what happens is people start to, if this is happening a lot, you start to experience chronic inflammation. And enough research is out there that we know that chronic inflammation triggers depression. It's almost like an allergic reaction for the body, and it triggers symptoms of anxiety. So the other thing that might be happening, though, is that depending on the combination of foods you eat, if you're eating foods that are super sugary or really heavy carbohydrates or high volume of carbohydrates, your blood sugar spike. And the body is super intelligent and reacts. Your pancreas creates insulin to keep your body in balanced in homeostasis. That's the goal of the body. But when we have these big peaks, these high peaks or frequent peaks of blood sugar spikes, it affects the body, and the pancreas has to keep producing insulin to bring that down, and it gets overworked, and we can start to feel a crash. You kind of feel that fog or those lows and these depression-like symptoms. So there's definitely real physiological aspects and mechanisms of action that are happening in the body. It's not just a thing that we think of in our head. But does that, give you a little bit of background? Yeah.
Yeah. Earlier this week, we did two stories that I want to get your take on as well.
Sure.
One was the new Mexican dietary guidelines, which I found to be fabulous, and I wish we had those. One of them was to avoid alcohol. And second story that we did was about the non-alcoholic beer movement, which has grown by 8 times what it was. And then there was an analysis of those people who are drinking non-alcoholic beers. Yeah. And it turns out that they're exercising more, they're happier, they're listening to more, webcasts and podcasts like this. It just seems to turn things around. What's your take on alcohol and mood? And, is it a depressant? Is it uplifting to people? What's going on?
Well, I mean, there's nothing good about alcohol. It's ethanol and it's toxic. And I think in the more and more we see, I mean, the World Health Organization came out earlier this year and said, in fact, no amount of alcohol is good for you. You're going to continue to see a huge trend of just the continued sober curious movement, the continued movement of non-alcoholic and just alcohol-free types of liquors. I mean, you can see it by the economics and the financials of what you sort of project this industry. There's a lot out there. They're equating it to the plant-based movement even greater. And, I always say I drink what I want when I want. But as I continue to get more educated and understand the risks and how literally 1 to 2 glasses of my wine that I used to enjoy a week can take years off my life. And when you really start to get into the data on why were we told that wine is healthy for us? I mean, that's a whole nother topic, and how
Well, because the wine industry paid for those studies. That's why.
well, and you peel back the onion on
Yeah,
who they were studying,
right.
the people, and
Right.
that's interesting. But so yes, I mean, when you consume alcohol, you initially feel this period of this little lift, and your brain is artificially producing dopamine. And as we talked about, your body always want to be in balance. The brain starts to compensate and excrete other hormones to bring it back in balance. And without getting too scientific, there are processes that are happening that increase cortisol levels, and other types of hormones and processes that happen that actually make you feel lower. And so it's really only the first 20 minutes you feel good, and then to get back up, you have to keep
Have to
drinking
take
more,
more.
and you just have to keep drinking more. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's amazing what happens when you just put something else in that glass. And I always tell, because I'm a big fan of mocktails, and a big fan of, I mean, the alcohol-free beer that's on the market, and now some of the wines. I mean, you honestly can't even tell. And once you have something in the glass, usually that need and that craving usually passes. It's all about ritual and routine for most
Yep.
people. And most people, within a few weeks of just experimenting with going alcohol-free, experience some amazing benefits, from skin to sleep. I personally, I have reduced my alcohol consumption greatly, because I have just found, after educating myself a little bit and paying attention to how I really feel, um, I get it. It triggers my anxiety, and oftentimes I can't sleep, and that rolls into every aspect of my life. And so it's just a beverage. So when you start to educate yourself on the real data behind what we're putting into our bodies and the potential risks, it's really eye opening. And I think when you my thoughts are, when you start to really educate yourself and you increase your awareness, it flips that switch, and then increases your desire to want to think about making changes. So I often share a lot about the data on alcohol and the science behind it, because it's one of those things in our society that it's expected that alcohol is going to be in a lot of events and just be a part of our life. And I'm excited to see how things are changing. And I think it also helps that you've got a lot of celebrities out there who are also sharing their alcohol-free journey, people that you wouldn't expect that are going alcohol-free, and people who are, Katy Perry's got a whole brand, and I think Blake
Mhm.
Lively does, of 0% or alcohol-free liquor. So I don't think it's going away.
No, I don't either. In fact, funny thing, you're talking about celebrities with alcohol. So Mark Wahlberg actually is a major investor in a tequila brand, but he has now stopped drinking as much of his own tequila that he
Yeah.
loves. He did it initially for Lent, and now he's saying that he might go back to drinking in June or July, but probably not as much. So, last question. If there's one thing that you would like every listener to do when it comes to making good food choices to help their moods, what would it be?
Oh man, I think that's a great question. Am I limited to one?
No, you can have two. You can have
I can
two.
have two.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the things that I would consider, especially, it's about how you feel. I think the two that I would pick, let's stick with the alcohol thing. So you might be a person, I'm saying you generally as your listener, that maybe has an occasional glass of wine or beer, or I'd experiment with limiting and reducing your consumption and just see what happens. I just know, I know a lot of people, I coach a lot of people and who want to have some weight loss or just want to feel better. And before we do any sort of planning, we look at lifestyle habits. And 9 times out of 10, even just the reduction of wine or alcohol, they start to feel amazing. They literally feel joy and awe. I mean, beyond just the weight dropping off and sleeping better, they are more engaged with their family. They have more energy. And I've done nothing but help to encourage, just try, like take a 10-calorie athletic brewing beer and put that in your koozie. Just see one night. And they start to get hooked on that feeling. So, and it doesn't, I'm also a big fan of you do you, but maybe you don't give it up forever, but you try, you experiment with just a limiting or making a choice one night. And people are amazed. They have no idea what the other side looked like. So I think there's space and there's room for people to experiment, even if you are a wine or an alcohol drinker. In fact, when I talked to you a little bit about those statistics about the alcohol-free kind of wellness trends, the study that I saw, it's like a Nielsen or some sort of data I saw in the beginning of the year, it showed that the people who are buying alcohol-free options, those are people who also have beer and wine in their basket. So there's this movement of just experimenting. So that's definitely a message I'd love to send to your listeners. And then I would also share, if you want to feel better, I would make sure you either overhauling or you're really checking in on that first meal of the day. Some people fast, so maybe it's brunch or lunch, but that first meal of the day, we need to make sure that it's got protein. A lot of people might even think that a bowl of oatmeal is healthy. And even if it is whole oats, you got to make sure there's protein in there. If you've got protein paired with good carbs, that first meal of the day sets the tone for the rest of the day. You end up, that's how you avoid those mid-afternoon cravings and crashes, is making sure that first meal, you've got good, solid, like lean protein choices, and you've got good carbs, but most importantly, you start your day with some protein. So that's definitely a practice that will help you to feel satiated, reduce the cravings, keep your energy more consistent. So that's a tip that I'd love to leave listeners with.
Well, Amy, you've got great insights, great knowledge, and we appreciate you being on Lost in the Supermarket today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And would love to come back sometime and have more conversations. I love riffing on these kinds of topics.
Always welcome.